So now I'm going to make the articulating, superior and inferior articulating processes. This is kind of going to be the opposite, where I want relatively thin but tall, and I'll just adjust these once we get in the window here. Okay. So what I'd like to do is maybe take advantage of this grid right now. I know I want my articulating processes to be above and below the body, because obviously there's a disk space in here and I've got to accommodate for the disk and reach. So I'm going to pull them about that far, and what I could do is actually say edge, drag, move, and I'm going to hold down the X so that the X, so I drag these edges to a grid unit. I'm going to do the same thing for the side. So I'm holding down the X again. You notice up here when I press the X, the snap to grid icon. So I could also come up here and click that snap to grid. I'm going to do the same thing here. And now I'm going to get the object and I'm going to modify center its pivot and just double check, you know, about how it feels like a little tall. So I'm going to just take that down again using the X1 unit. Okay. So we can always adjust this again later. I'll pull it out to the side a little bit and again snap it to the grid. Alright, so what I want to do, let's go to the graphic view. Let's go to the front window for a second. I'm sorry, the side window. So you can see I can use some adjustment here using the same technique. I'm going to grab the edge, snap it to that grid there, grab the back edge if you will and snap it to the grid there. Okay, so now what I want to do is I really want to go back to this window a little bit. I'm going to grab just, let's see if I can make this easier for you to see. I'm going to go to panels, layouts, 2 panes side by side, and I'm going to make the front, and I'll make this one side so you can see what I'm doing. Grid was turned off when it was perspective, and that kind of held over. Okay. So I'm going to focus just on the arch itself. So I'm going to click, this time instead of dragging, I'm just going to click that edge. And then I'm going to hold down the X key and bring that edge down 1 unit. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing then for the bottom. I'm going to click. So what I'm trying to do is make a symmetrical piece. So I'm going to grab the edge. Again, now I've got the bottom front edge. Okay, and I'm going to hold down the X key and bring it up 1 unit. Sorry, that's not going to work. I want the opposite side. Okay, so I'm going to change this real quickly to the perspective view. I'm going to find my, so there's my front. So here's my back edge. And now here in the side view, again using the X key, I'll snap that. Okay, so that's my piece now, my articulating superior and inferior surfaces. Let's go back to do a 4-panel view here. So I'm going to say layouts, 4 panes. I'm going to change this panel back to perspective. Okay. And if I dolly out a little bit, oops, sorry. Keep the object selected now. And I'm going to change this one up top here back to top so I can see where I am. So I'm going to position this right about there. Okay. It's going to come out a little bit past the body, not too much though. And let's just get a little closer to see where I am. Okay, I'm not actually close enough. I want to get there. Okay. And I can actually make this wider now. I really don't. I'm going to select the object, center its pivot, and now that I've got the 2 surfaces that I'm going to attach, I can actually adjust this a little, not worrying too much about. Okay, I'm just going to keep it. So I'm going to keep it right now perpendicular or along these axes, perpendicular to the Y and X axis. All right. Then I can see how well things are working. So one thing I could do to kind of test this out, it looks to me like this is a little short. I need a disk space in there. And I don't want to stop the tape and look up the size, but I think the disk is going to be about that far, about like 1/3 of the body. So I'm going to make this about like that. Okay. And what I could do, just to kind of real quickly see if it's feasible what I'm doing here, I could grab all these shapes, go under Edit, Group, Modify, Center Pivot, Edit, Delete by Type. So if I say delete by type history, I'm going to lose the bend deformer on the arch. So just in case I need that, I'm going to use this term, delete by type non-deformer history. That gets rid of all the inputs and outputs and edits and tweaks that have been going on for each of these shapes, but it allows the bend handle to stay there. Okay. So theoretically, I should still be able to see, and I can move it and change it. Okay, so that's working. Okay, so I'm going to take this group now, and I'm going to say Command D, duplicate it, and move it, and take a look at it. Oh boy, did I make a mistake. Look how much room I left for that. So take this down to about that size, and I'm going to select my original, scale it a little shorter, take the duplicate, scale it a little shorter. Let's go in closer so we can see what's going on. So I can kind of do that. Okay, and that's pretty close to what we want. So you can see I'm 1, 2, about 3 units above the superior surface of the body. So I'm going to use that as a guide and say, so I've got my scale tool now. I'm going to hold down the letter D, which means move the pivot point, and I'm going to hold down the letter C, which means snap to curve. I'm going to click on the Y-axis and middle mouse drag. So when I now scale, I'm only scaling in this direction. And I'm going to use that same distance, if you will, for the bottom, or the inferior articulating probe. Okay? I'll go back and say modify center pivot. Okay, just to see if I'm copacetic, I can take group 2, delete it, go back again to group 1, Command D to duplicate, move, and there we go. So that's about right. I think that's still a little big, but we can adjust that if we really have to. Again, like I said, you can look on your My Courses and you can see the actual height of the body of the vertebra, let's say at T6, versus the disc, and you can use that size relationship to kind of stay closer. Okay, but that's how we now have a duplicate. We have the two vertebra. Now the question is, really, is this the way that that articulating surface is oriented? And quite honestly, no, it's not. The superior would be facing posterior. So I can rotate it by going into the, I believe the Y. No, I'm sorry. It would be, yeah, the Y, okay. So now I'm facing the back. And now what I'm going to do is rotate it a little more just freehand, because they're not perfectly perpendicular that way. Even though this is a schematic, I want to reflect that a little bit more. Now what I can do is say D, and again X. So I move my pivot point to the center and do the same thing we did with the transverse process. Go to duplicate special. I want to make sure we're only making one copy. The only change is that we're scaling it inversely in the X axis. Whoops, it didn't work. Let's see why not. Okay, so we've got all this information here that's been done to that. So what I'm going to do is modify freeze transformations. Okay, oops, I'm sorry. I don't want to do the whole group, I just want to do this one structure. So I'm going to say edit, delete by type history, modify freeze transformation. Okay, so now it's zeroed in, and the pivot point is still where it should be. So let's try doing the duplicate special now. See, so once we reset this, now you can actually, with this new one selected, this duplicate selected, should also say freeze transformations on it, because watch what happens. We lose that -1 scale. You don't want that -1 scale to stay active, because it will eventually cause problems when you try to do things. So now I've got the top ones done. Actually, group 2 is now better than group 1, so I'll just delete group 1, select group 2, duplicate it, Command D or duplicate, Control D on a Windows, and then move it just in the Y-axis. And that will give us that set. Now if I smooth this, I think you're going to find that, see what's going to happen is I'm going to get a little too extreme. So let's go back and fix that real quick. So the easiest way I can think to do that is to add an edge loop to stop it from, or to reduce that. I can't at this point, because I've edited this, I can't go back to the input. If I had been a little smarter, what I could have done earlier is use the input to give me more subdivisions in the height. I think if I hit 3 now, I see it's going to hold its shape much better. Okay, but of course now I've got a problem because only that one, the bottom one, is correct. So let's do the same thing we just did. Object, where its pivot point is. Pivot point's in the right place. So we'll delete its mirror image. And since we have that set up, we can just say duplicate special. And now again, we're dealing with, this time it's group 3, so we'll delete that. Command D. So the point is, it's easier to work with duplicates than to try to edit all of them to match. And now we've got a pretty decent articulation there. We've got all our structures except for the disk.